I'm very pleased and honoured to introduce Ben Jones, Global Creative from Google, and your panellists, Jonny, Spindler, and Justine Bloome. Give me a massive round of applause for Ben, Jonny, and Justine.
Thanks, you guys, a lot for coming out. Glad to see you on such a hot day. I think that some of the magic of Con is not being super overscheduled and letting the serendipity of the moment just take you maybe deeper and deeper into a bottle of rosé. In that spirit, we had Bonin from Mondelez supposed to be on our panel today. Thanks to the wonders of the French labor system, he's not able to join us. So we'll give ourselves over to the serendipity of the three of us, and I think that we'll have a wonderful panel. So Justine is the head of innovation and strategy in the US. We've done a series of awesome experiments with her and her team. Super excited to talk about those. And Jonny, for those of you who don't know the legends of Jonny, he's the global head of innovation for AMV BBDO. As we think about the world that we live in, I think it's not news to any of us that it is a world that is full of an infinite amount of media, billions of hours of YouTube, all of the shows that we want to binge watch, we love, connected in the palm of our hands to the world's media in every moment in time. And I think that none of us have really grappled with what that means and how it's changing, because that's not the world that we grew up in, and that we have a muscle memory that's left over from the old world that we were a part of. So we're going to start by talking about what's going on in this media world. How are we thinking about it, the nature of the media that we're experiencing, and then what does it mean for advertising? And I'm going to start just by lobbing out an idea that we think about at Google, and then we'll jump into conversation. I think that there is a false model we have in our heads that the digital world is about faster, right? Faster, faster, faster. I'm skimming through my feed. My tweet is 140 characters or longer. Now, my snap is going to disappear in no time at all. The entire world needs to be faster. But if you look across media, that's not actually true. Media is not getting shorter, it's getting longer. Hollywood movies are getting longer. They're cut quicker, but they're getting longer on average 10 minutes over the last 5 years. Books are not getting shorter, they're getting longer. Shorter chapters, but longer books. Poor George R.R. Martin has written 5,000 pages of Game of Thrones, and he gets hate mail from his fans when he's doing anything other than writing the books. They're like, finish the books before you die. So I don't think that the media world is about faster. It is about the things that we want. We choose those things and then immersing ourselves in them, diving deep in them. And if we try and not get blocked out, we're not getting chosen. My feeling, our feeling, is that this world is built on choice plus immersion. We're not drowning with a fire hose of media anymore. I think we're swimming in a sea of media. The room is filled up. The world has filled up. We live in an ocean. And with that, I'm going to stop talking and sit down and say, Justine, tell me what you guys are thinking about the world of media. What's changing? What's different? Where is it going?
I agree from a choice perspective, and I think that comes down to how personalized media has become. And it sounds cliched, but when we think about just how much time everyone spends with their mobiles and the opportunity for us to rethink what that means in terms of advertising, that I think is the biggest opportunity that we're exploring. Just this notion of not interrupting them, because if you think about, you're either using your phone to get something done, or you're waiting for something and you're probably entertaining yourself or passing the time. And those choices that are made, if you're an advertiser interrupting those choices, that is an old model that doesn't necessarily work in the most personal device that we have. So how do we think about new units or new ways of enhancing that experience that doesn't interrupt that experience? That's probably what I'm spending the majority of my time thinking about.
Well, let me ask you a question about that, because we see this huge rush into brand content, right? Brands all need to be publishers. We're going to publish an incredible amount of content, and yet the same 2 eyes, the same 24 hours in the day, like who's going to pay attention to all this content? How will people be engaged in this sort of infinite amount of content?
Well, I think that's, again, back to the personalization piece, is that notion of reach, like let's just reach as many people as we can with this one message. The content that we're creating ideally is nuanced and relevant to the individual, so that the one person, yes, is receiving probably the same amount of content that they've ever received, but it should be more relevant. So we're cutting out the irrelevant stuff that we are ignoring, ideally, and receiving things that are more beneficial to us or provide more utility.
Yeah. I think that there is a Well, let me just back up. Actually, we had a great conversation about sort of brand and brand content and where it's going. You said a thing that I have repeated 10,000 times, sometimes crediting you, sometimes not. That in the future, your competition is going to look more like HBO than Ogilvy. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think if you go back, say, 10 years ago, and we all started talking about fragmentation, proliferation of media, and we all thought we've got to make more things for more channels, more spaces, it's almost like the reverse has happened. And because of all of the the social channels, all the algorithms, because of search, things that are popular are now even popular than they've ever been before. You talked about Hollywood movies. 10 years ago, people thought Hollywood was going to be dead, and it's never been stronger and bigger. You talked about kind of books. And actually, because of the fact we all share, because of the fact we're all talking about the things we like the most, if anything, the things that always were the best are now even bigger and even better. It's the reason every year Hollywood breaks the next box office movie stats, because every year more and more people are talking about the best movie, and I think it puts even more pressure, I think, on us creatively. There's that great stat from back in the 60s, I think, in the US, when people were asked did they about commercials, and they preferred the commercials more than the content that was in the commercial breaks. And we used to have the advantage that you could make stuff that was actually better than the stuff that people were watching, so people would talk more and enjoy more the stuff that was in the commercial breaks than they would the content they were watching. But suddenly, the HBOs of this world have upped their game, and the content is better than it's ever been before, and we've been left behind a little bit. We've suddenly got very rational. We've got kind of very product focused. We've lost the engagement, the entertainment value, and maybe the talkability of a lot of the creative work we put out there, while the entertainment industry's gone the other way and has never been better at telling stories, building characters, and building emotion.
So let's talk a little bit about big stories, because you talked about relevance and you talked about that sort of talkability, the social piece of that. I think one road that you go down with relevance is a story that ultimately is private to me almost, right? It's so built around me and what I like and what I'm about, and yet, to your point, the Hollywood movies are getting bigger and bigger, these like grand scale stories that everyone talks about, or songs that everyone hears. And so how do you think we find that balance between a thing that is tailored to me and useful and relevant, and a thing that feels like I'm joining something that's bigger than me? Like we're all watching the Battle of the Bastards, right? That's not personal, it's not individual, but what's the balance between big stories and highly relevant personal stories, you think?
I think first it's going to depend on the brand and the brand's role in someone's life, because not every brand has an aspiration to entertain you. Pfizer is a client, for example. Like you're not going to expect some big entertainment piece from them that's going to have talkability. You need something from them that's going to solve your issue, and you want the right information about that and the right way of getting that in a timely fashion. That's relevant to that brand. So I guess it's going to depend on the role of the brand in the consumers' lives, and us determining that, and then deciding how much personalization, how much relevancy versus big talkability that is required.
There may be a greater opportunity for Viagra brand content than perhaps they would be willing to pursue, but we'll leave that for another time.
Yeah, I think it almost feels, sometimes I think we think it's harder or smarter to find all these very relevant individual, personal kind of things to connect with, where arguably it's easier to do that. It's easier to look out and see what individuals are doing. The harder challenge quite often is actually finding something that the universal audience actually care about. Like what's going to be that single thing that unites everybody, that everybody wants to talk about, is actually a harder challenge. Because if I wanted to just find out what you're talking about now, it's easy. Just go and look at your feed. But to try and work out how I find something that relates to you, to me, to Justine, that requires quite a lot of work and intuition that you can't just do from analysing some data. So I think we heard a great talk this morning over in the Palais from a guy from Pixar. And the way he talks around trying to understand what people are, what their characters are kind of feeling, the emotions they're conveying, because that's going to resonate with every single person that watches that Pixar movie, whether they are a 6-year-old kid or the 60-year-old granddad of that kid. Yeah. And I think that's the challenge that we have actually first and foremost, before we get carried away with then how can we then add all those little elements of personalization once we've cracked that.
Yeah. I feel like there's been this incredible innovation on the data side, the ad tech side, all of this. We know so much about you and what you've done and what you've consumed and what you may be interested in. But I feel like we're at a sort of event horizon around, then we're just repeating things that you already did or behaviors that were before. And I don't think we've made that imaginative leap into what would come next, what what can we predict where you're going, right? I don't think imaginatively we've gotten our brains around what all that data can say. I don't know what you guys think about.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that the data is never going to entirely replace people in this process. The value of creatives and the value of people to interpret the data and the human side of that data is always going to be there because, as you say, the data can't predict what's necessarily going to be intriguing or interesting that hasn't interested them in the past. I'm fearful of a world where we have no serendipity, where there is no discovery just by happenstance, that everything is relevant to the point of living in an echo chamber. Yeah. That scares me, and I think that's where human beings and using that as a data-informed creative aspect, not a data-led creative process, that I think is the difference that we need to get. We need to make sure that we maintain that in order to have that leap.
Yeah. So we've got huge streams of data coming in. We've got tremendous pressures from the market and the marketplace to be smarter, better, more nimble. We've got tremendous pressures on the content side, thousands and thousands of hours of stuff. How are your organizations changing, adapting? What processes are different? Like, how are you dealing with that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's been the theme of a lot of conversations so far this week. I mean, diversity of talent specifically is a huge issue. So you kind of, how we engage in and bringing people into our organizations that can process and understand that data, that can convert it into tangible insight, how we bring in people in that know how to create new things in all the new formats. But then importantly, it's not just the people that we're bringing in, is then how do we open ourselves up to be ever more collaborative than we've always been. And it's interesting. We sometimes get a hard time as agencies for not collaborating hard enough. But by nature of being an agency, we've been kind of an agent of creativity for as long as agencies have been around. We've always collaborated with the best directors, the best photographers, the best artists, the best musicians. I mean, our whole business has been about collaboration in everything that we've made. So how do we now open up that collaborative mindset beyond the talent we've always worked with, and now start going out and talking to data experts, scientists? How do we bring in young filmmakers that aren't burdened with the last 20 years of how to do things? To your point earlier, coming at it with new thoughts and new ideas. Yeah.
Are you building teams differently? Are you working differently with media agencies? I mean, my partner, as I came up, was a media guy. He was not. I'm a writer. He was not an art director, which is why all my stuff looks like crap. But the media creativity with the writing, I think, was really powerful and brought new insights. Are you guys thinking about teams differently and how they're structured?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reality that we are a service-based business, so we're always structuring ourselves to a degree in line with our clients, and obviously we have some clients that are themselves going through more innovative processes, ways of working, organization structures, which then allows us to be a bit more flexible and different. If a client's happy not to have layers and layers of process, then they don't suddenly need to have layers and layers of client service. Or if a client's happy to open up their internal systems and share thoughts with people that aren't long-term partners under strict NDAs, and they're happy to bring in young filmmakers, or happy to let IBM have a look at the data that they've got, then obviously it allows us to be far more open as well. But I mean, we're constantly, testing different models ourselves on the clients that we're allowed to. I think the link with media is ever more important. I think we're seeing a lot more global contracts now. It's not surprising that they're happening at a holding company level, because it's almost going back to that fusion of media and creative, where within a holding company they can genuinely put those teams back together, where it is media sitting with creative. But in absence of that, we have to work out how to do it, because it's beneficial to both of us if we're making that work, even if we're not part of the same holding company.
Yeah. Justine, how about your side of the house?
Yeah, I think this might be the reason I was hired. So I am clearly Australian, and I have moved to the US, but I was hired because I've actually got a creative background, and this is my first role in a media agency. So my team, as we have built them out, are, again, those very diverse talent, diverse thinkers that have a cross-section of talent. So some have come from content backgrounds, others have come from technology, some from creative, some from media. And we sort of talk about our team as being sitting at the intersection of content, commerce, media, and experience. So we're thinking beyond just media. What that means for us is that whether it's inside our holding company when we have partnerships with some creatives from inside, or whether it's a brand they work with Anomaly or they work with any BBDO, we are actually able to, from our perspective, we kind of, there's a different syntax and a different language that tends to happen in creative agency, and sometimes it takes someone to be able to translate this is what this insight means for creative versus what it means for media.
Yeah.
And we're building a team that can do that, can transverse those conversations and make sure that we remain relevant in and earlier upstream in the conversations about how channel selection informs sometimes the creative process and vice versa, so that it's a really symbiotic relationship. Back to the days, I guess, where possibly not where full service was like the last 5 minutes of the presentation was media, but it's a true collaboration.
Yeah.
And that does take, as you say, different talent, new talent that have a deep specialism in a certain area, but I call them T-shaped people. They know enough to be dangerous about a lot of things.
Yeah. One of the things, one of the reasons that we're connected to you guys is we've done this series of experiments before through the Unskippable Labs program. Let's talk a little bit about Twix. So Twix came to us after Con last year, and they said, we need to be more agile. We need to push our agencies to be more agile. What can we do? So we came up with a program where 10 creative teams around the world had 48 hours to produce an ad, not just produce, but shoot, edit, get approved, and be ready to go live in 48 hours. So we had teams from Brazil, from the US, from Europe come into the YouTube space, produce these 10 ads. We ran them in the US, in the UK, and the Netherlands. And I think with just tremendous results. 4 of the 10 ads were in the top 25% of all ads that were on YouTube last year. So the next time that you think your schedule is cramped, imagine that you're producing ads in 48 hours and yet are still sort of cream of the crop. Talk about that experience for your teams at BBDO.
Yeah, it's from a positive perspective, it's a great opportunity and it's a lot of fun. Creatives love. At the end of the day, creatives are only as good as the work they make. So when suddenly someone turns around to a creative team and says you don't have to go through the next 6 months of hurdles, you can actually get that work out in 48 hours, obviously on face value, it feels like a great opportunity. It's obviously a challenging opportunity because a lot of things that make work great are the fact that you go back to it, you look at it, you share it with people, you bring people in, you talk to a number of directors, a number of ways of producing it, and it's the craft of that work is harder to achieve. You can maybe get to the idea in 48 hours, but how an idea sometimes is executed is where that time is. And I think ultimately it would be good to get to a place where there's a bit of a balance.
Yeah.
If we were trying to knock out ads in 48 hours every time, I think we'd end up with a lot of bad advertising. But I think what was interesting for us is more the principles of a different process. Now, of course, this was an exaggerated. It doesn't have to be 48 hours. It could be a month rather than 3 months. But the concept and the idea of if you get everybody together at the start, kind of whether it's kind of clients, whether it's creative teams, whether it's strategy, and you actually agree a different set of rules. We're not going to go through laborious ways of feedback. We're actually all going to be in a room, looking at that idea, working in a much more agile kind of process to produce this content, and you remove all the barriers that slow it down. I think taking that learning and trying to extrapolate that up into how we produce all the work we produce is what we found most enjoyable about the experience.
It was amazing. I think the clients they were very resistant to the idea that they would be responsible for actually approving things in 40 hours, and then jumped in and got very excited and very energized. And I think that the challenge is clients are putting pressure on agencies to be agile, but I'm not sure that clients themselves are becoming agile in the same way or have the same expectations of agility. Justine, what's your experience with the client side of that?
Yeah, I think there's, I think to jump into 100% agile is just an unrealistic expectation of anyone. It's how we kind of, I call it planned agility, because we can plan out probably 80 to 90% of the things we need to be agile about, like the known knowns and the known unknowns. We can plan for them. It's the unknown unknowns that the piece where you truly have to be agile, like that 48-hour turnaround or less. That really only is about 10% of what you should be doing, because otherwise you'll just be chasing shiny objects.
Yeah.
So the planned agility is how we really approach that. So it's agile in its optimization and its activation once we're in market. but the planning around how we're going to deploy that, what content we need, what creative do we need, is planned ahead to be ready for the variations that we're going to need.
I have a little surprise for the last 10 minutes. Speaking of the unknown unknowns, in the spirit of experimentation, we actually have an Unskippable Labs experiment that's running live in market right now. And I thought I would share with you the experiment fodder that we have, and we could bring our collective wisdom to bear on what we think is the future. So this set of experiments is about mobile video storytelling. Let me just find us here, because I had a ton. Ah, yes, the future. I found it. It's here. Okay, so I think that we've inherited a language of storytelling from film and television, and I'm not sure it's serving us well, and I'm not sure we're doing enough experimentation to figure out whether it's serving us well. And so our team shot a set of ad-like objects. They are not going to win any craft awards at Cannes, but they're deliberately pushing the envelope to say, does this specific dimension change storytelling on mobile, or does that specific dimension change storytelling on mobile? So I've got 3 experiments here. I'll play the first one, and then you'll know the script, so we won't need to, but you can look at the dimensions. So one of these is pacing. If you look at feature films, the rate of cuts in feature films has fallen precipitously over the last 50 years. It leveled out in the late 80s and early 90s, and then has subsequently fallen off a cliff again. So I'm not sure that the language of pacing that we're used to is actually the rate at which people want to absorb stuff. So I'll show you these 2 first slow.
Don't you hate it when you just get stuck? You try this, you try that. Nothing seems to work. You ask the internet. Nothing. You ask the internet again, but differently. Maybe you even ask an actual human. Nobody seems to know.
How can I get the help I need? I'm stumped.
That's how I was. And then I found the thing.
Looks like a box.
It's not. Well, it is a box, but that's not the thing. It's the thing. And the thing about the thing is it unsticks the stuck no matter how stuck you are.
I want one.
Of course you do. It's the thing.
So that's slow pacing. This is the fast cut.
Don't you hate it when you just get stuck?
You try this and you try that, but nothing seems to work.
Left,
right,
up,
down.
nothing.
You ask the internet.
Nothing.
You ask the internet again.
But differently.
Maybe you ask an actual person.
Your peculiar neighbor?
That friendly barista?
Nobody seems to know.
You're stumped.
That's how I was.
Until I found the thing.
Looks like a box.
But it's not.
Well, it is a box. But that's not the thing.
It's the thing.
And the thing about the thing is it unsticks the stuck.
No matter how stuck you are.
Want one?
Of course you do. It's the thing.
All right, slow, fast. So that's pacing. And then we did tight and wide, again, with the theory that on a mobile phone, you're close. We've seen, our research has shown, showing faces early is more effective. So if we had a tight crop versus a wide crop, we think the tight would be more effective on mobile. And then our favorite orientation, right? Horizontal or vertical. Horizontal or vertical, what would make a difference in storytelling? So we come to the interactive portion of our program. With the 45 minutes that I spent with the spreadsheet this morning on our first tranche of data, we found one of these findings was very significantly different in mobile and positive. One significant but unexpected, that is, we were wrong in our assumptions about it. And one was insignificant, made absolutely no difference to performance. So here are 3 choices: horizontal and vertical, tight versus wide, fast versus slow. Let's start with insignificant. Which do you think of these as insignificant in mobile storytelling? Justine, what do you think?
I'm going to be controversial and say orientation.
Orientation, insignificant?
Insignificant.
Wow, what do you think? People, orientation, insignificant or significant in mobile storytelling? No, not significant, insignificant, significant? Significant, I got a significant here. I think last year a lot of the conversation was taken up where Snapchat published research that said 8x video views for a vertical video as opposed to horizontal video, and intellectually it makes sense. Johnny, what do you think?
I'd have said orientation as well.
Orientation is insignificant? You guys are too good. Orientation, insignificant. It makes no difference. There was absolutely no difference in performance. And in fact, the orientation view through across all the versions was the lowest. All right. So these were both significant. One we were right about and one we were wrong about. Which do you think we were right about? Johnny, you go first this time. Pacing or framing?
I'd have thought pacing was very significant, and the tight versus wide was insignificant but unexpected.
And insignificant or unexpected? Justine, what do you think?
That's what I was going to say, but I'm going to say the reverse just to be different.
Yeah. All right, what do you guys think? Do you think pacing is important, tight versus wide? Do we want a tight crop or a wide crop? What do you think? What do you think? Yeah. All right, the findings that we had. Pacing, very significant, extraordinarily significant. Some among the highest view through and the hugest delta between desktop viewing and mobile viewing. And tight versus wide, wide actually outperformed by a reasonably significant margin, which based on the research we've seen doesn't really make sense. So we're not sure if that's due to creative performance or not, but it's interesting to see in an experiment like this where the data is. What do you think?
Did the fast outperform the slow or the other way around?
Fast outperformed the slow by a significant amount and significantly better on mobile. Like the delta of performance was much higher. Yeah, so we're doing all of those. We got another set launching this morning. They are color saturation, they are gender, so we swap the roles of the actors, and story structure, we reverse the order. And then as soon as I have time to write supers, we're going to do supers plus sound and no supers as a control. That's the next set.